We begin in the Mishnah in the beginning of the fourth Perek of Masechta Beitza. Zok Heilige Mishnah, Hamevi Kade Yayin, someone that's bringing barrels of wine, Mimakim Lamakim, from one place to another. Lo Yeviyim B'Sal or B'Kupa. You shouldn't carry them the way he usually does on the weekday when you bring many together in a basket or in a box. So as Rashi here says, this Mishnah, this halacha, is based on the concept that Chachamim didn't allow to do certain things on Yom Tov in the same way it's done during the week, because it's a Ma'aseh Chayil, and Rashi once said before that this is Mizalzel the Yom Tov. So here as well, you should not bring it many together that's in a basket or in a box. Avol meviu al ksefai, but he can bring one or two at a time on his shoulder. Oy lefanav, or holding it in his hands in front of him. V'chein, similar, hamelech hasatevet, a person that's bringing in straw to feed his animal or for a fire. Lo yafshel esakupa la chayrav. You should not carry it the way you do during the week. You throw it in your back and lower it down in your back. Avol meviu biyada. You bring it in your hands. You carry it in your hands, so you see that you're not carrying a lot for big work. You're doing it different than you do during the week. Another halacha is the Mishnah, umaschilin ba'arei masateven. You're allowed to start to use from a pile of straw that you had, and Rashi says what this means is that it's a pile of straw that was there that was not designated by you specifically to be used for a fire. Nevertheless, you're allowed to start in Yom Tov to go and take it to use for a fire. So from here, it seems like the halacha the Mishnah is saying is that there's no issue with muktzah. Even though it wasn't specifically designated for this, it was just in a storage house, it was just in an area there, nevertheless, you can begin and go ahead and use it on Yom Tov. Aval, but then the Mishnah says, Loi be'etzim sheba muktzah. You can't take wood that's in the backyard, that's in an area that's there for long-term storage. That's why it's called muktzah, because it's there, it's separated for storage. From there, you're not allowed to take the wood for a fire on Yom Tov. From this part of the Mishnah, it seems like that the issue is muktzah, because you didn't specifically designate it to use for the fire, so therefore you're not allowed to use it. The Gemara will discuss the obvious contradiction between these two halachas here. Zok the Gemara, Tana, so regarding the first halacha of the Mishnah we learned, Im i'ef shel shanois, if when you're transporting something from one place to another, and you're supposed to do it differently than the way you do it during the week, but if you can't make any change, and Rashi says, let's say you have guests and you have to bring a lot at once, and you can't just carry one or two on your shoulder, so you have to bring all the jugs of wine in a basket or in a box, mutter, so it's allowed. It's allowed to bring it the way you bring it during the week. Askin Rava b'Mechuzah. Rava instituted in his city in Mechuzah that the daru b'duchaka, those things that are carried on the shoulders, and they're carried with more of a strenuous an activity that a person has a tirche in it more. So then, lidru beraglo, you should carry it with a pitchfork, differently than it's done during the week. The daru beraglo, those things that are carried with a pitchfork, lidru ba'agra, it should be carried with a pole that you put on two people's shoulders. The daru ba'agra, things that are carried on a pole that two people carry on their shoulders, lidru ba'achpa. Now it should be carried on one pole that a person holds in his hand by himself. The daru ba'achpa, things that are carried on one pole that you hold in your hands, nifreis besudre ilavei. So carry it, but cover it with a handkerchief. So you're not carrying it the way you do during the week. It's covered, and that's enough of a change. Im lo yefsher, if it's impossible to make any change from the way it's done during the week, shari, you're allowed to carry it the same way that you carry it during the week. Doma mar, because the master had said, Im yefsher l'shanois, if you can't make a change from the way you carry it in the weekday, mutter, it's allowed to be carried the way you always do. Amar le Rav Chanan bar Rav Rav Ashi, Amar Rabbanan, the Rabbanan said, Kama the efshel l'shanuye mishaninam b'yom tov, that as much as it's possible to make a change when you're carrying things, you should make a change during Yom Tov. So if so, our question is, v'hahani noshi, but you have these women, the kamalyin chatzvayu ma'i b'yom tov, they fill their buckets with water on Yom Tov, v'loi kamishanyan, and they don't make any change from the way they do it during the week. And we don't comment to them, we allow them to fill up their buckets of water without any change. Why? So he explained them as follows. Mishum de le'efshe, because it's not possible for them to make a change. Hey chileve, what should they do? The malye b'chatz v'rabbe, if you fill up during the week with a large bucket, tamalye b'chatz v'zute, on Yontif they should use a small bucket. That's not a good change, because now kamav should be hilucha. Now it'll increase their walking. They have to walk back and forth more often. So there's more of a tircha in that sense. The malye b'chatz v'zute, one that fills with a small bucket, tamalye b'chatz v'rabbe, instead they should fill with a large bucket, and you don't have to walk as much, but kamav should be masay. But you have to, the tirche is that you have to carry more. And Yontif, you don't want to make a change that causes more work. Tachasye benichteme, should you cover it with a lid? Zimnin, the nafal vasi. But we're concerned that it will fall and then it'll come to carry it. According to Rashi, it seems like you're not guided this, because this is not an issue of Yontif to carry it. La asuya, the vasal asuya goes together. Zimnin, the nafal vasal asuya, you may come to bring it and carry it on Yontif. So as I said, according to Rashi, it seems like it just continues to tick today. Tick today, you would tie this lid. You would have to tie the lid on top of this bucket. But zimnin, the mifsik, v'asil miktere, the knot of the tie will snap, and you'll have to come to make a knot on Yontif. Tifrei sudrei lavei, should you cover this bucket of water with a handkerchief? Zimnim the mitmish b'maya, but it could become soaked with the water. V'asil de schite, and you could come to squeeze it out on Yontif. So hilkach lo yafsher. So the women that are filling their buckets of water, it's not really possible for them to make any change from the way they do it during the week. Therefore, we allow them to carry it as is. The Gemara interjects and brings another case where there is a certain takana midrabanan, and it doesn't seem like that we enforce this. Amalei Rava bar Rav Chanan la bayet. Now we learned in the Mishnah, ein mitapchen, you're not allowed to clap your hands, vein misapken, you're not allowed to bang your hands on your thighs, vein miraktem, you're not allowed to dance. This is all exeter of Chazal, so that you shouldn't come to be misaken a klishir, to make musical instruments on Yontif. V'idne, the kachazina, and the avnachi, and now we see that people do this, and we don't comment, we don't protest against this. And according to your reasoning, this that Rabbi said, I'll bring you another example of something that the women do that we don't comment and we don't allow them to do it. So Rabbi said the following halacha: when you have a alleyway that's enclosed from three sides and it's open on the fourth side into a Reshus HaRabim, so the halacha is Chachamim were mesakin, in order to be allowed to carry inside that area, you have to put up either a lechi, which is a side beam at the entrance of this malvoy, at this alleyway, or a kaira, a cross beam. But the Chachamim were mesakin that even though you're allowed to carry inside the alleyway, but right there within that area, right at the opening of the alleyway into the Reshus HaRabim, where the side beam is or the cross beam is, there you should not carry. So he said, do not sit there and bring your things over there at the opening of the alleyway where the lechi is. Because maybe an object that you're holding there so close to the Reshus HaRabim can roll down into the Reshus HaRabim, and you may come to carry it in. That was the takana that Rabbi said. But v'hahani nashi, we see these women, the shaklan chatzvayu, they take their buckets, v'azlim v'yasvan apumid demuvah, and they go and they sit right at the opening, right there by the place where the cross or the side beam is, and they sit there, v'loim rinu v'loim midi, and we don't comment to them, we allow them to sit there. Elo, so therefore, what he explained to him is, in some situations we say as follows: Hanach lahem li Yisrael, leave Yidden when you see them doing these things. Mutiv sheyu shaygigin va'al yimizidin. Rather, it's better that they should be doing wrong what they're doing, but in a way that they're unaware, than in a case where you'll tell them and they'll be aware and they'll do it anyways, and they're not going to listen to you. So it's better that it should be done as a shaygig. So hachanami hanach lahem li Yisrael mutiv sheyu shaygigin va'al yimizidin. The same applies also to the Mishnah before regarding not clapping or dancing or so on. And over here as well, regarding not sitting all the way at the opening of the alleyway with an object that can roll into the Reshus HaRabim. But the Gemara clarifies, V'hani mili, when do we say this concept? B'derabbanan. If it's only a takana b'derabbanan, then we don't have to protest or explain them. Aval b'dayraisa, but if it's something which is asam and atayra loy, then we can't say that. Then we do have to tell them what the halacha is. But the Gemara immediately says, V'loihi. But this distinction, though, between Midrabbanan and Midraisa is not accurate. Lo yishna b'deraisa, v'lo yishna b'derabbanan. There's no difference if it's midaraisa or midarabanan. Loi amrinan lahu v'loi midi. If someone is doing something because he's unaware, so then we don't tell him. When it comes to the halacha of adding time to Yom Kippur, that we learn out, Rashi brings the pasuk v'nisem es nafshei seichem b'tisha. So we learn from there that you have to begin fasting still from before Shkia, from when it's still daytime. So this is Minat Torah, it's learned from the pasuk. And people eat all the way to the time when it's dark. And we don't comment. We allow people to eat all the way till the end of the day of Erev Yom Kippur. So we see that even regarding a subject Minat Torah, you still say this klal of mutav sheyiyeh shaygigim va'al yiyu mezidim. But there are 2 points that the Rishonim qualify this concept of mutav sheyiyeh shaygigim va'al yiyu mezidim. One is that this Gemara says that there's no distinction between the Iraisa and the Rabbanan. You allow a person to do it b'shaygig. That's only if it's something Minat Torah that's not explicit in the pasuk mamish. Even this halacha of Taisus Yom Kippurim, the simple pshat of the pasuk over there, it actually says v'yinisim es nafshei seichem b'tisha be'erev, in the evening. The Taisus Yom Kippurim is a drasha of Chazal that you read it b'tisha, that you have to begin fasting from Tisha. So it's not mefurish in the pasuk. Something which is mefurish b'pasuk, you don't say this klal of mutav sheyiyeh shaygigim v'al yiyu mezidim. Another point is, this whole klal is only said if you know that the person you're going to tell this to is not going to listen to you. So all you're going to accomplish is that instead of him being a shaygig, he'll become a mezid. But if it's a case that you know that a person is just simply unaware, and he'd be very happy if you tell him and he'll listen to you, for sure you have to tell him what the halacha is. Going back to what it said before about not clapping and dancing on Yontif, so there's a Taisus here that says, halacha l'maisa, that this is all in the times of Chazal, where people ordinarily, they knew how to make a kli shiur. There was a real concern that a person is going to make a musical instrument if he's going to be singing and dancing and clapping. But in today's days, Taisus says, Einanu b'kiyim lasas kli shiur v'lo shayach l'migzah. This gzeira of those times does not apply today. Sagt the Gemara, in the Mishnah, umaschilin ba'arei mesateve. You can take from the pile of straw that was not designated for firewood, you can take it and use it for a fire. Amar Rav Kahana, so Rav Kahana said, Zoyisei meres. So what does this part of the Mishnah mean? Maschilin ba'oitzet chila. You can start and use from a storehouse of in this case it's straw or wood, whatever it is, even if it was not designated from before Yom Tov. Mani, so whose opinion does this follow? Rab Shimoni. This is Rab Shimon, the Leslie Muktzah. Rab Shimon does not hold of the Isser of Muktzah, as long as it was something that was fit for use from before Yom Tov, even if you did not designate it for that purpose, you can use it. Hey, Meseifa, what does it say right afterwards in the Mishnah? You cannot take the wood that's in the backyard in a place of storage to use for firewood. So Asan Rabbi Yehuda, the Islay Muktzah. So this follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that says that the issue here is Muktzah, even though it was fit for use from before Yom Tov, but it wasn't designated for this. It was in the long-term storage. So there is an issue of Muktzah. So there's a stira here in the Mishnah. So the Gemara explains, Rav Kahana said, Hacha ba'arzi va'ashuchi. In the Seif of the Mishnah, when it talks about this wood that's being stored in the backyard, it's talking about cedar wood. Ashuchi is another type of cedar wood, askino, and that's what it's speaking about. Over here, even Rab Shimon would agree. The muktzeh machmas chesar and kis. This is separated, not for firewood use, and there's chesar and kis. To go ahead and use this for firewood use would be a huge loss of money, because this is expensive wood, and it's specifically designated for construction, to build with it, but not for firewood. So even Rab Shimon would agree that in this case, a person specifically does not want to use this, and therefore on Yom Tov you can't take it for firewood. So the Mishnah could all be following Rab Shimon's opinion. Others learned what Rav Kahana said, starting with the Seif of the Mishnah. Then in the Seif it said, you can't take the wood from the backyard where it's stored there for firewood and Yom Tov. Amar Rav Kahana, so on this Rav Kahana said, so this means to say, you can't start in Yom Tov to take from storage of wood to use it for firewood if you did not designate it before Yom Tov. Mani, Rabbi Yehudi. So this follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, this le muktzeh, that says that there's an issue of muktzeh if you did not specifically designate it. Mereisha, what does it say in the beginning of the Mishnah? Right before this, Maschilin ba'arei masateven. You can begin to take from a pile of straw for a fire, even without being designated. Asan Rab Shimon, the lesle muktzeh. So that follows Rab Shimon's opinion that says that there is no issue of muktzeh here. And on this, the answer was given in the reverse, that this will go all like Rabbi Yehuda. Hasam betavne sarya. In the Reisha of the Mishnah, it was speaking about straw that's completely rotten and spoiled, that cannot be even fed for animals. So the only thing it could be used for is firewood. So therefore that's something that even Rabbi Yehuda that holds of muktzeh holds that in this case the person has definitely had in mind to use it for a fire. In fact, the Gemara, really, there's something else that could still be used for. Tav nesarya hachazi latina. Even if you can't feed it for animals, but it's still fit to be used for making cement of it. So it's not necessarily something that he specifically wanted to be used for fire. So the Gemara says, no, there is beik koitzim. Not only is it rotten and it can't be used for animals, but it also has thorns in it, so it cannot be used for cement. The only thing it's fit for is for firewood. So this is something that even if he didn't specifically designate it, that's what it's meant for. It's meant for firewood, and therefore it can be used on Yontif. Whereas in the Eitzim Shebamuktzeh, which are put away there in storage in the backyard, so that according to Rav Yehuda is muktzeh and you can't use it. Zok Teilige Mishneh. You cannot remove wood from a sukkah. So the sukkah we're speaking about over here, as Rashi says, is not for the mitzvah of sukkah on sukkahs, but it's speaking about a hut that a person might have made in order to sit in it in Pesach time, in Shavuos time. And he sits outside, sits in a sukkah, in a hut, or in a garden, or in an orchard. So you're not allowed to take wood from there to remove it, because, as we'll see in the Gemara, you're demolishing a structure. There's the Isser of Seiser. Ela menasamuchla. Something that's near it, that's allowed. The wood that's near it is allowed. So as Rashi says, at this point, we're thinking that what samuchla means is when you have this hut and on the roof there's wood, and there's a pile of wood on the roof that's thick enough that you could remove some of it. It's not the first layer of the roof, it's sort of samuchla. It's another layer on top on the roof. That you're allowed to remove. So what's the difference? That to remove wood from the hut itself is not allowed because you're demolishing this structure. And this is the malacha of Seiser. So what's close to it, meaning the added layers that there are on the roof of this schach, of this covering of this hut, is namika sasa Allah. You're also demolishing a part of the structure. Because, as Rashi explains, whatever is placed on the roof becomes part of the roof. It's a thicker roof, it's a thicker covering, but it all becomes part of the covering. So whatever you're removing a part of the structure. So that should also be part of the malacha of Seiser. So how is this allowed to be done? So therefore Rav Yudah Mashmuel says, "My samuch," when it said in the Mishnah that what's near the structure you could remove, samuch ledefanis. It doesn't refer to what's on the rooftop that becomes part of the roof. It refers to the wood that's lying on the ground near the walls. It does not become part of the walls. So that you are allowed to remove on Yontif. Rav Menashe said, I could even say that it's not talking about the wood that's near the walls. It's talking about the wood that was added on top, on the rooftop, and seemingly becomes part of the roof. But ki tanya hahi, or rather in the other girsa, it's going in our Mishnah, ki tnanai, what does our Mishnah mean to say? Besur yaisa. When you placed bundles of wood onto the rooftop and you didn't open the bundles, so it doesn't become bottled to the rooftop, it's not part of the roof, and therefore you can remove it on Yontif. Tanya, we learned, or the Bach's guide is Tani Rabchi Bar Yosef Kamei de Rabbi Yechanan. He learned in front of Rabbi Yechanan a Braisa which elaborates more on the halach of the Mishnah. Not allowed to remove the wood from this hut. Only what's from near it. Rab Shimon matir. Rab Shimon allows even to remove wood from the structure itself. Vishavin, everybody agrees, b'sukkah sachag, that if it's a sukkah for the yontiv of sukkahs, b'chag, during the yontiv of sukkahs, sha'asura, that it's not allowed to remove any of the woods from the sukkah. V'im hisnala, however, if you made a condition, when yontiv came in, you made a condition before yontiv that you want to be able to remove it, then we follow your condition and you would be allowed to remove it. So the Gemara now will explain this different parts of this Beitza. It said in the Beitza, Rab Shimon allows to remove woods from the structure, from the hut that's made to sit in. Fragt the Gemara, how could it be? But Allah, he's demolishing a part of this tent. How could Rab Shimon allow the malach of Seiser on Yontif? What we're speaking about over here is a sukkah, a hut that already had collapsed. And therefore, Rab Shimon is saying, after it already collapsed, it collapsed on Yontif, you're allowed to take the woods from there. When you want to take the woods to use it for firewood, you're allowed to take it from there. Rab Shimon l'taimei, and Rab Shimon is following his opinion, the less le muktzeh, because Rab Shimon does not hold of muktzeh. In other words, even though when Yontif came in, this was not designated for firewood, it was part of a hut. But because now it collapsed on Yontif, so therefore you could go ahead and take it. Where do you see Rab Shimon says in such a case there's no muktzeh? The Tanya we learned in Beitza, moiser hashemen shebener, the leftover oil in a lamp, v'shebekaira, or in a plate that was burning a fire. Also, you're not allowed to take it, it's muktzeh. It was part of this lamp when Yontif or Shabbos came in, so you're not allowed to use it later when it goes out. Rab Shimon allows. So just like over there, even though it's on Yontif, on Shabbos, that the fire went out, and now there's leftovers, Rab Shimon allows to use it. Similarly here, this structure, this hut that was up when Shabbos and Yontif came in, and now it collapsed, you're allowed to take it. Frek the Gemara, but me dummy. How can you compare the case of the leftover oil to this collapsed sukkah? Hasam, over there by the oil, Adam Yeshivu Mitzape Eimesei Tichben Neire. A person is waiting, in other words, he's expecting that this candle, the fire is going to go out, and he's going to have leftover oil from it. That's just the natural what's going to happen. So therefore, in such a case, I could understand that Rab Shimon holds there's no muktzeh here. The person was expecting to use it. However, over here, regarding this hut, Adam Yeshivu Mitzape Emes Etipol Sukkasai, was the person expecting and waiting when is his sukkah going to collapse and he won't be able to sit in the sukkah? Adarabah, he was planning on using the sukkah for Yontif, for Shabbos. So how could you compare? Over here, maybe Rab Shimon also holds of muktzeh. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, so Rav Nachman Yitzchak adds another detail. Hacha b'sukkah ru'ua askina. We're talking about a very flimsy hut. The me'esmoil daitel aveh. Already yesterday he was thinking to himself, maybe I can use it a little bit, but eventually this is going to collapse on Yontif, and I'm going to use the wood for firewood. So in such a case, Rab Shimon holds that there's no muktzeh, and therefore you can use it for the firewood. The next thing it said in the Beitza was Vishavin. Everybody agrees. B'sukkis achag b'chag. When it comes to the sukkah of the Yontiv of Sukkis, shehi asura, that you're not allowed to have any anah from the woods of this sukkah during the Yontiv. V'im hisne aleh. However, if you made a condition, you follow the person's condition that if he said, I want it to be allowed for me to use, so then you can follow his condition and it's allowed. Frek the Gemara omi mahani batnai. And does a condition help for the sukkah in the Yontiv of Sukkahs that you should be allowed to have anah of it? From where do we know that the wood of the sukkah is aseh to have anah of all the 7 days of the Yontiv Sukkahs? Shenema, because the pasuk says Chag HaSukkahs Shivas Yomim LaHashem. So what do we learn from this pasuk? Chag HaSukkahs Shivas Yomim LaHashem. V'Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, Minayin. Where do I know? Shekishem shechal shem shemayim ala chagige. Just like you have the Eibishter's name, there's a kedusha that takes effect on a carbon chagige. Kach chal shem shemayim ala sukkah. So too you have the Eibishter's name, the kedusha that takes effect on the structure of the sukkah during sukkahs. Tamad loima chag hasukkos shivas yamim laHashem. When it says chag, it's we darshan this to refer to the carbon chagiga, and therefore we say ma chag laHashem. Just like the chagiga, there's a kedusha that is the shem shemayim that takes effect on the carbon chagiga. Av sukkah laHashem. So too the sukkah, it takes effect in it a kedusha that it belongs to the Eibishter. So we see over here that sukkah is unique, that there's a kedusha that takes effect in it. So how can we say that you could make a condition regarding this that it should not be yasser? It becomes like a carbon. So if it becomes like a carbon, how could the person have a nah of this? This is a unique thing that you find regarding the mitzvah of sukkah that you don't find regarding other mitzvahs. There is a halacha regarding other mitzvahs that while it's being used for a mitzvah, you should not use it for any other use that's not for the mitzvah, which embarrasses the mitzvah. It's a bezoyim for the mitzvah. But there's no actual kedusha that takes effect in the mitzvah itself, in the object of the mitzvah. Sukkah is the only mitzvah where there's a limit there from the pasuk that it's like a carbon, that the object of the mitzvah becomes holy like mamish, like a carbon. This is a unique thing that is dafke in Sukkah, and the Rebbe speaks about this ba'ariches that you see over here, the koyach of the Sukkah, where the kedusha that comes in the Sukkah affects the physical structure of the Sukkah more than any other mitzvah that there is. The achdus of the Eibishter in the world that comes down to holiness, the kedusha, comes down and affects the actual physical structure of the Sukkah itself. So the Gemara now explains what the Beitza meant, that you can make a condition. So Amar Rav Menashe Berei Derava, or the Bachas Geiris, Amar Rav Menashe Amar Shmuel, Seifa Asan L'Sukkah Dalma. When it says in the Seifa about making a condition that you should be allowed to use this Sukkah, it wasn't referring to the mitzvah of Sukkah. That is also the entire Sukkah stavana of. It's referring to Sukkah D'Alma. It was referring to the first part of the Mishnah, which spoke about the hot that is used on any other Yom Tov. Avol Sukkah the mitzvah loy mani batna. But when it comes to the Sukkah of the Yom Tov of Sukkahs, a condition does not help, and it's going to be asr like a carbon chagiga the entire Yom Tov. Frek Gemara, but is that true? The Sukkah, the mitzvah loy, regarding the Sukkah, which is the mitzvah of Sukkahs, does a condition not help to allow you to have a no of it? But for Tanya, we learned in the Beitza, Schacha, Kil Chasa, you made a Sukkah properly according to the halacha. And you added all kinds of decorations in the Sukkah. Ve'itra, Bekramim, and you put inside of it some decorative curtains, Sadinin Ametziyaran, embroidered sheets, Vitalaba, Geizim, or you hung in it nuts, Shkedim, almonds, Afarsikim, peaches, Rimainim, pomegranates, Parchile Anovim, or grapes, clusters of grapes, Yeinois, a glass of wine, Shmanim, oil, Saltes, flowers, Atre, Shibolim, wreaths of grains, all these different kinds of decorations that you hung to be part of the Sukkah. Aser lehistapik men, you're not allowed to have any anov, any of this, ad motzei Yom Tov achen shulchag, until the last day of Yom Tov goes out. The decorations become bottled to the Sukkah. It's part of the Sukkah itself, and therefore, just like on the Sukkah, there's the kedusha on the Sukkah, you're not allowed to have anov of it. The same thing is also with the decorations of the Sukkah. Ve'im hisna aleyem. However, if you made a condition on this, hakoy lefitnoi, if you want to make a condition that these decorations should be allowed for you to use, to take off, and to have a no of it, so then that Tanai takes effect. So the Tanai does work. So how could we say before that regarding the Sukkah Shel Mitzvah, there's the Shem Shemayim that's chal on it, and the Tanai does not work, when in this Beitza it clearly says that the Tanai does work. So Abaye v'Rava, the Amri Tarvayu, Abaye and Rava both said, Ba'omer eini boidel mem kol ben hashmashes. Specifically, when it comes to the decorations of the Sukkah, there a person can say that I am not separating myself from these decorations, the entire ben hashmashes. These decorations are not the actual structure of the Sukkah itself. So those are the things that when Yom Tov comes in, a person has the ability to remove them. So he can say, I don't give up that right, and I don't want it to become bottled to the Sukkah. It should be something that I still have the ability to use if I want to drink the wine or use the oil. So from Ben Hashmashis, the person is making that condition, and then the entire Yom Tov, it does not become bottled to the Sukkah, because you follow the status that it had at the time of Ben Hashmashis. So therefore, the Lechala Kedusha Alayu. So the Kedusha of the Sukkah will not take effect in these decorations, because the person made the condition, it's not bottled to the Sukkah. Volatzi Sukkah, but when it comes to the wood of the Sukkah, the Chal Kedusha Alayu, the Kedusha of the Sukkah takes effect on the wood of the Sukkah. A person can't make a condition when Yom Tov comes in that I'm going to demolish, I'm going to take off this wall, I'm going to take off this chach. As soon as it comes Ben Hashmashis, he's not allowed. Taking off of the wall of the schach, it's demolishing, it's seiser. So he can't make such a condition regarding the actual structure of the Sukkah itself. So therefore, once he can't make that condition and he can't remove it when the Yom Tov comes in, is katzai l'shiva. So therefore it takes effect, the kedusha for all 7 days, that this is the kedusha on the Sukkah itself, that a person can't remove it. So therefore, regarding the Sukkah itself, there is no condition to be made. Frag the Gemara, but what's the difference between the Sukkah, where we're saying that no condition helps and it becomes holy for the entire Sukkahs, Mehad Itmer, from this that it says regarding the Daled Minim. Hifresh Shiva Esroigim L'Shiva Sayam. What happens in a case if a person designates he has 7 different Esroigim that he's using each one for one of the days of Sukkot. So Amar Rav, so Rav says, Kol achas va'achas yotzeba. Each esrig, he's yotzeba on that day that he's using it, and v'oichlo la'alter. And after he did the mitzvah with it, so even on that day itself, he can go ahead and eat it right away. He doesn't have to wait until the next day. Ravasi says, Kol achas yotzeba v'oichlo la'malchar. Each one you do the mitzvah with it, and you can eat it tomorrow. So the machlokes between Rav and Ravasi is whether the esrog gets designated for the mitzvah, and after the mitzvah is done, you can have a gnaw of it, or it's katsoi, it gets designated for the entire day, and the next day you could use it. So the Gemara's question is, as Rashi explains, if I say regarding the dalad minim, regarding the esrog here, that it's separated, designated for that day, and then for the next day you're able to use it, you're able to have a gnaw from it, why shouldn't we say a similar thing regarding the sukkah? True, as we explained, the moment Yontif comes in, Ben Hashmashis comes in, you can't make a t'nai that right now, at the time of Ben Hashmashis, I still want to use it, I still have the right to break the sukkah, to take away the schach, because it's Yontif. And Yontif, you can't demolish the sukkah. However, that's all for the Yontif though. But why shouldn't I say that the t'nai should work, that for Chalamayid, you should be allowed to demolish the sukkah? Right? Just because of the Ben Hashmashis, of the Yontif, it should not allow you for Cholamayit to take it apart. Just like Menegeh to the Esrog, I say that each day is different. There's a status of one day and another day and a third day. So over here as well, I should make a difference between the Yom Tiv and Cholamayit. For Yom Tiv, I say that it became designated that you couldn't demolish it, and therefore it's the Kedusha's Chal and you can't remove it. But for Cholamayit, it's another day, and there's another halacha. There's no problem of Seiser, so there you could remove the schach or the walls of the sukkah. So the Gemara answers, it's not the same thing. Hasam, when it comes to the esrog, the mifsukal leilas miyamim, the nights separate from the days because you can't do the mitzvah by night. So therefore, kochad v'chad yoime, each day of the 7 days of Sukkot, mitzvah ba'api nafshahu. It's a mitzvah for itself. And therefore, the esrog that's designated for one day is not going to be, iskatzoi, is not going to be designated when it comes to the next day. However, over here, when it comes to the sukkah, the loy mifsakul leilos miyamim, where the nights don't separate from the days, the 7 days of sukkah, it's one long mitzvah of sukkah that you have the obligation, or you have the mitzvah on all the days or the nights. If you want to eat, you have to eat in the sukkah. So therefore, kuli yaimi, all the days of sukkah is kachada yaime arichte dami. It's like one long day, and therefore it's once it's designated by Ben Hashmashis, the first night of Sukkot, that you couldn't demolish it, and this is what the Sukkah is. It remains that way. The kedusha remains in it the entire Sukkot. Let's continue the next Mishnah on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Zog Heilige Mishnah meviin eitzim min asada. Again, coming back to the halachas of bringing wood that you want to use for firewood on Yontif, and you did not designate it from before. So the Mishnah says you can bring wood that's detached, obviously, that you can bring it from that was out in the field, as long as it's inside the tchum of Yontif. But in the field, it has to be, this is another case, if it's something that was piled, that was gathered already from before Yontif. So he makes it clear that he wants to use it for on Yontif. But if it's scattered around, so then you're not allowed to. Menakarfif, if you have wood that's in a place which is an enclosure. It's an area that's gated in, fenced in, so that's something that is enclosed over there. You're allowed to use the wood from the karfif, even if it's scattered around inside this enclosure. Because over here, because it's guarded and protected inside this area, it's designated to be used for the Yontiv of Sukkot. Ezeu karfif. What could we define as an area that's guarded, that's enclosed? Kol shesamach li, has to be an area that's close, very close to the city where you're living. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yosi says, Kol shenichnasim loy b'paisachas. Any area that's locked, and you have to have a key to enter, that's considered to be protected. Even if it's further out, as far as the Tchum Shabbos, even it's right at the end of the Tchum, as long as it's locked, it's okay. You can use the wood that is in that area, even if it's scattered around. So you're not allowed to bring wood. You're not allowed to bring wood for firewood unless it's gathered inside an enclosure. In other words, in the Mishnah it said that it could be scattered in the enclosure. He says no, it has to be gathered inside this enclosure. So the Gemara asks, we learned in the Mishnah that if it's in this enclosure, so then even if it's scattered around. And for the Gemara, Masnisin Yechidahi. Our Mishnah follows the opinion of one single Tana, which we'll quote right now. The Tanya we learned from Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Rab Shimon ben Elazar said, Bisham did not argue if you have the wood that's scattered around in the field. You're not allowed to bring it in for firewood. And if you have wood that's gathered, that's piled inside an enclosure, that you can bring it for firewood. In what case do they argue? If it only has one of these milas, if it's scattered, but it's inside an enclosure. Or in the reverse, if it's gathered, but it's out in the field. You can't bring it, you have to have both. It has to be in a karfif and gathered. Or Beitza says as long as it's either gathered or it's in the enclosure, then you can bring it. And that's the Tana of our Mishnah going according to Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Like Beitza said, that if it's in the karfif, even if it's scattered, you're allowed to bring it in. But Rav Yehuda ben Shmuel held that this is all Rab Shimon ben Elazar's opinion. But the Chachamim disagree with this, and the Chachamim hold that even if it's in the karfif, it also has to be gathered in order to allow to use it for the firewood and yontif. Omar Rava said, Ale konim, the leaves of reeds, va'ale gefanim, the leaves of vines. Afalgav de mechan filuhu, even if it's gathered, the moisvi, and it's sitting in one place, but it's still you can't use it for firewood, because kivin the midli zike, if the wind comes and blows on it, mevadaluhu, it's going to go and spread out. It's like it's already spread out. Putting it together is not considered to be designating it in one place because it blows around. And therefore it's also to use it for firewood. But if you put like a heavy object on it from before Yontif to keep it in one place, then it's considered to be gathered and you can use it on Yontif. It said in the Mishnah, Ezeo Karfif, what's considered to be this enclosed area. So Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be samuch le'ir, close to the city. And Rabbi Yosi said, kol shenichnasim lo b'peisachas, if you have to go in with it, into it with a key, afilu b'toich tchum Shabbos. Even if it's further out, as long as it's in the tchum, it's considered to be an enclosure. So the Gemara has an Ibaya how to interpret Rabbi Yehuda's opinion and Rabbi Yosi's opinion. Ibaya loho, so the question was asked over here, heichi ka'omar. How do we understand what Rabbi Yehuda was saying? Did Rabbi Yehuda really mean to say that in order for it to be considered a karfif, a guarded, protected area, it has to be both? It has to be near the city, and it also has to be an area that's locked, that you need a key to enter. And the reason why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say it clearly, as Rashi says, is because a stam karfif is an area that has a lock on it. So he requires both conditions for it to be a karfif. Now, Vasa Rabbi Yosi, that is Lemeima, and Rabbi Yosi came to say, Kivin this le Pesachas, as long as you need a key to enter, even if it's further out, it's also okay. So Rabbi Yosi holds only one condition is required, meaning according to Rabbi Yosi, if it would be near the city, then even if it's an area that you don't need a key to enter, it's a karfif. What Rabbi Yosi is saying is either or. Either it's near the city without a key, or if it's further out, if it's locked and you need a key, it's considered to be a karfif. So Rabbi Yehuda requires both conditions, close and a key, and Rabbi Yosi requires either or. That's one way in understanding what the Mishnah is saying. The machlokes are Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi. Or maybe their machlokes is as follows. This is what they were saying. Rabbi Yehuda was saying, Kol shesamuch le'ir, if it's a karfif that's close to the city, so then, bein des le pesachas, bein de les le pesachas, whether you need a key to enter or not, that doesn't matter. The key makes no difference. The only thing that matters is that it has to be near the city. That's the one and only condition that matters. And Vasa Rabbi Yosi lemeima, and Rabbi Yosi comes and argues and he says, Afilu b'toich tchum Shabbos, that it could be even further away as long as it's within the tchum. And what v'dafke the is le pesachas, it has to be an area that is locked and you need a key to enter. Aval les le pesachas, if you don't need a key, I feel even if it's going to be close to the city, nami loy, that's not going to help. In other words, Rabbi Yosi also holds that there's only one condition that matters, and what is that? The key. If you need a key to enter. So both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi hold that there's only one condition to make this a karfif. But Rabbi Yehuda holds the condition is that it has to be near the city. and a key to enter or not doesn't matter b'chlal. And Rabbi Yosi holds the one condition is that you have to have a key to enter. And with the location, if it's near the city or far from the city, that doesn't matter. Toshamas, so the Gemara says, let's look at the words of Rabbi Yosi. Let's see what he says, and we'll see what he holds. Diktani, it says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosi oimer kol shenichnasen loy b'pesachas. If you need a key to enter, va'afilu b'toich tchum Shabbos, even if it's far, it's at the end of the Tchum Shabbos, so then it's considered to be a guarded area. Shmamino, so we see over here, Rabbi Yosi tarti l'kula ka'ama. So Rashi explains what the Gemara is saying here. If, like it said in the second way of the Ibaya was true, that is, that Rabbi Yosi holds the only thing that matters is a key. The close to the city, far from the city is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the key. So Rabbi Yosi should have just simply said, Kol shenichnasen lo b'pesachas. That the only thing that matters is if you need a key to enter. Why does he add va'afilu b'toich tchum Shabbos? That even if it's far away, as long as it's within the tchum, the closeness, the distance doesn't matter b'chlal. The only thing that matters is the key. The fact that he says if you enter with a key, then even if it's far away, it's still going to be an enclosure. What do you see over here? That according to Rabbi Yosi, it's either or. If it's far away, so then as long as it's protected because you have a lock and you have to go in with a key, then it's considered to be an enclosure. If it's close to the city, so then you don't need it to be locked. Then the fact that it's close is enough that it should be considered to be an enclosure that is a karfif. That's the lashon that you see from what Rabbi Yosi is saying. So in the words of the Gemara, so Shmami no, Rabbi Yosi tarti l'kula kama. Rabbi Yosi was being lenient, and he was saying that it's either or. Either you can rely on the fact that it has a lock, and then it's far away. It's still a karfif, or if it's close by, you don't need a lock. Shmami no. So you see this clearly here. And Rashi adds that you could also see what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was over here. If Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that you do need to have a lock in it, and Rabbi Yehuda was actually being machmed that you need both, a lock and close to the city, so then why did Rabbi Yosi begin saying Kol shenichnasen lo b'pesachas? Rabbi Yehuda also holds you need a lock. Rabbi Yehuda's main chiddush was that it has to be close to the city. And if Rabbi Yosi is coming to argue on that point, Rabbi Yosi should have started off saying, I feel if it's far, even if it's far, as long as it's b'toich tchum, it's still allowed. Unlike Rabbi Yehuda that requires that it should be close by, if that's the main point that he's arguing on. Elamai, Rabbi Yehuda held the key is irrelevant. You don't need a key, whether you need a key to enter or not, that's not negeya. The only thing is negeya is that it's close to the city. And therefore, on that, Rabbi Yosi begins and says, no, kol shenichnasen lo b'pesachas. Only if you enter with a key. So it comes out that Rabbi Yehuda is mekel. We go in the way we interpret Rabbi Yehuda, we're taking the lenient interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda only requires samach le'ir, which was the second way of the Ibaya, and we interpret Rabbi Yosi's opinion also in the lenient way, which was the first way of the Ibaya, that it's either or, either close to the city or the key. That's how Rashi understands the pshat and the Gemara's raya from the lashon of the Mishnah. So the Gemara concludes, Amar Rav Sala, that is, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Halacha Rabbi Yosi, we paskin like Rabbi Yosi, and Lahaka, like the lenient version, that a karfif is either close to the city, or if it's far, if you need a key to enter.